Hi guys, it's Lucy. This week I wanted to talk about a really great book that I read called Born a Crime, and it's by Trevor Noah. This came on my radar a couple years ago, and I knew it was a great story because I was in the bookstore and I read 30 pages of it just standing there. And when I picked this up, which if I don't know how it's like in your city, but Facebook Marketplace has become one of my go-tos for used books. That's where I got this one, a hardcover for about $6, which is an amazing deal. I read this in 2 days, and I'm not someone who's very well versed in South African politics at all, and this is a great introduction. So first of all, just the title itself, Born a Crime, is a really it's an awesome title because just from that alone itself tells you a little bit about the culture. And if you remember Encased by Isabel Wilkerson, she mentioned South Africans, the colonialists at the time trying to study racism and segregation, and they actually went and consulted politicians and the laws, the Jim Crow laws specifically from the American South, and applied the most effective parts of that to South Africa in terms of policy. So that's exactly what happened in South Africa. You've got segregation, you've got trying to move legally or illegally moving people into reservations, and slavery, essentially all happening at the same time in a very systematic, condensed way, and it's atrocious. But one of the results of that was, as a white person and a black person, you can't be in a relationship together. You cannot have children together. So Trevor Noah himself, being a mixed race individual, which is a whole category in South Africa, they call themselves colored, or the colored people. That itself, his family is committing a crime for every day that he existed, essentially. And he talks about this in his book. After I read this book, I looked up a few of his comedic stand-up clips from YouTube, which he talks about some of that as well. So if you don't want to spend the whole 200, 300 pages reading the book, or if you don't want to download the audiobook, which I think he narrates himself, you could always check out some YouTube links that I'm going to put underneath my review video. And I really think that as a stand-up comedian, he's very entertaining as well, compared to like talk shows, which it's him interviewing other people, so you don't get the Trevor Noah personality from watching the shows that he hosts. So yeah, I really recommend the stand-ups. If I were to describe this book in 3 words, I would say candid, vivid, and astute. So a lot of insights about how the different dynamics, because you've got groups, you've got the colonialists and also the Afrikaans, which are like the white people who weren't the colonialists but somehow formed their own groups within South Africa, and they speak their own language. And you've got the coloreds, which Trevor Noah himself technically is, but he doesn't identify himself much with this group. He identifies himself more with the blacks. So within the category of blacks, you've got various minority groups which speak their own languages. And it's one of the reasons why when Nelson Mandela took over the country politically, they tried to be inclusive and essentially made like 11 different languages, official languages of the country, to be inclusive. But there are issues with that when it comes to inclusion. So himself writing stories from his childhood is fascinating, because from a child's perspective, you get to feel all the pains, all the political pains, but it is extremely serious. There's so many situations where where he even acknowledges himself that could have gotten himself and his mother killed, but it doesn't feel that way. And I think it's because he wrote in such a way that reflects maybe the forces that influenced him. So he mentioned Roald Dahl and being a huge fan of Roald Dahl, and it was very coincidental, because when I read that, it hit me how much this format that he's writing in sounded like a mixture of Boy and Going Solo, which are two books that Roald Dahl had written that were the only two like semi-autobiographical stories that he wrote. He wrote very, like James and the Giant Peach or like Matilda, Witches, which are all very imaginative and fantastical, but Going Solo and Boy were two of my favorites. In Boy, he mentions, going to board school and all the pranks and all those things growing up until he graduated. And then in Going Solo, he talks about his adventures, I think, in Egypt and perhaps somewhere in Africa as well, working for Shell and World War II. Very, very similar format that Trevor followed in his book. So that's my short recommendation. I think this is a great one to read if you're coming out of the whole Isabel Wilkerson phase, or all the the Black History Month, Asian Heritage Month. South Africa is a place where it's not as on our radar as North Americans, and it really should be. So I think this is a great one that I would recommend to everyone. I hope you guys have a great week, and let me know if you read this as well, because I know it's probably one of the most popular books that I've talked about so far on this channel. So I would love to know what you think about Trevor as a comedian and his stories if you've read them.